That includes our fight to try to keep your names and personal identifying information out of the hands of some folks whose motives haven't always been the purest, particularly for that group of more or less 218,000 voters who, for no fault of their own, fall into that group of voters that many of the liars and conspiracy theorists have accused of being non-citizen voters. Now, let me be very clear about that. Every single person on that list has sworn under penalty of perjury that they are a U.S. citizen and eligible to vote. They've done the exact same thing that every other American citizen in the United States of America has done. But because here in Arizona, we have that extra thing that needs to be done, that extra documented proof of citizenship that is not required anywhere else in the country. Now we find ourselves in this quagmire. We have a motor vehicle division that appears to not have been complying with the law for almost 20 years. We have a United States Supreme Court decision that has confused and confounded administrators of these laws right before an election. Thankfully, we have an Arizona Supreme Court that has indicated very, very clearly that every single one of these voters is eligible to vote and eligible to vote in every single election. The Arizona Supreme Court made it clear that we will be addressing this issue after the election, as we ought to have. And thankfully, there are some sober minds on the bench. Today, we have complied with and are complying with a court directive to release specific voter records for 218,000 individuals as part of our ongoing legal process. This list has been turned over to the plaintiffs in the matter that was before the courts, and they are allowed to give it to the counties and to state legislative representatives. I again want to apologize to some of those voters out there who are feeling a little bit uneasy about some of these folks having your name and personal identifying information. I tried to stop this. Now, let me reassure folks, however, that you will be able to check to see whether or not your name is on this list. If not right now, then within the next hour or two at my.arizona.vote. If your name is not on this list, then there are other things that we'll talk about in a minute. But if your name is on this list, if you think you are one of those folks who's been voting in Arizona for a long time, the state Supreme Court has flat out said you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Legally in Arizona for 2024, you are eligible to vote a full ballot, and no one has the right to harass you at your home, demand identification from you, or otherwise. If anyone does do this sort of thing, please contact our office or your local law enforcement agency. Voter harassment and intimidation is a violation of the law, and if given sufficient evidence, we will provide that to the proper authorities for prosecution. All voters on this list are, again, authorized to vote a full ballot. Now, what's going to happen in the next few days and the next week or so? County recorders are going to be contacted, and they will be contacting the voters on the list in due time later this year so that we can make sure to gather the appropriate documentation for each of these individuals so that they can come into full compliance with the law. We will discourage voters to contact your local election officers right now because they have an election to run right now, and you are under no obligation whatsoever to provide documented proof of citizenship if you're on this list. Now, because this is such a morass, and because the legislature keeps changing rules and the Supreme Court misunderstands how these things work, there are some individuals who have recently registered who still have to provide documented proof of citizenship by 7 p.m. tomorrow night, Tuesday, November 5th, so that they can vote, and that ballot will be counted. Again, because of the way Arizona has treated its voters, which is different than any other state in the union, we have this confusion. We have these issues. We're hoping to be able to work with folks to make some clarifications in the law over the next legislative session. We're hoping to work very closely with the county recorders well after this election so that we can cure this up on an individual voter basis. But again, let me reiterate what I said at the top. I have fought as hard as I could to keep your names and your personal identifying information away from the folks who I don't trust. And I have good reason not to trust them with that specific information. But also, in accordance with the court's orders, we have turned over and are in the process of turning that over. If there are any violations of the court orders by the folks who will be getting this information, those violations we will be turning over immediately to the Attorney General and the Department of Justice for prosecution and or referral to any other appropriate agencies. I am not happy with what is happening right now because I know that there are a lot of people out there that are scared and worried. But rest assured, we will continue to fight. We will aggressively move against those folks who would intimidate Arizona's voters and try to harass them just because of who they are or because of the lies and conspiracies that keep getting foisted on our voters by folks who mean this democracy harm. We mean to protect our voters, and I will continue to fight to do that. I'll take a few questions. Ahorita al ratito se lo voy a hacer en completo en español. Yeah.
There is a video on social media circulating right now, which alleges that they're from a former employee of this office, and it basically claims that there is a push by your office to vote to have Kamala Harris win presidency. Mm-hmm. What's your reaction or response to this video being shared on social media when we have seen a lot of different AI videos, and you've even addressed AI as well? I mean, is this AI, and what's kind of your response to that video?
Well, first, we've seen the video. We understand its contents to be completely false, fake, fraudulent, and I don't know, pick the word, it's bunk. We have spoken with the appropriate federal agencies regarding it. In fact, I'm going to get briefed on it real soon here, and that's why I can't spend too much time with you today. But rest assured, we had prepared for this sort of thing. It's what we've been talking about for well over a year. We're excited to be working with people about this. We also understand that a lot of the misinformation and disinformation like this video are coming from, and we suspect this is also coming from foreign governments. And they want to do us harm by dividing us. They don't want us to believe in one another. They want us to think that these conspiracy theories are true. That the governor is giving me orders, to falsify stuff, and that we're packing, voting rolls and all this stuff. It's another piece of the nonsense. But the enthusiasm that the voters are showing with this incredible turnout, the fact that people are willing to stand in line to get that vote cast, gives me hope. It's the voters that motivate me to continue these fights. And so we're going to keep fighting for them on all sides. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Sage Okovinder of the Associated Press. Can you speak to why Pinal County and Maricopa County were under the impression that they needed to verify DPOC before tomorrow, despite the Supreme Court ruling? There's been reporting in both feeds about that.
Well, this is another one of the problems that we have in Arizona's crazy bifurcated system that gets, sort of beefed up by some of these weird statutes from the legislature, and then again these strange sorts of rulings we got even from the United States Supreme Court, where they would say, well, if you use this form you're good to go, and if you use that form you can't vote. I mean, this is this is where we are right now. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that anybody's confused about this. We've been doing our level best to talk to the counties and help them understand what our understanding of the law is. But at the end of the day, these are very difficult and complicated spaces that we're operating in. And I can't believe how much time I've got to spend with my lawyers just to unravel some of these crazy rules that have been shoved down our throats by a legislature that's more interested in seeming tough. And then when we ask for resources to make these systems work, they deny us. So I'm less impressed with that. Mary Jo?
So my.arizona.vote is where individuals can go if they suspect that they might be among that pool of 200-some thousand people. Why didn't you have this set up earlier? This has been percolating for weeks.
Well, the website's been set up, and we've got the final hooks that are getting put into place right now. But I'll be honest with you, Mary Jo, we've got an election to run, and we've got a whole host of other things that we've been needing to deal with. And we were actually hopeful that the courts would be a little more sympathetic to our voters, and that we wouldn't have to engage in this. But because we got there, we needed to do just a couple of minor tweaks to get these things up. myarizona.vote is going to have some instructions in there right at the top. You'll have to do some logging in and some verification of identity before you get to whether or not you're on the list, but that's just a safety feature so that we can verify that folks are actually checking on their own
So
information.
you can't get other voters' information off of that. You can only check for yourself.
You've got to be able to check for yourself. This isn't going to be something where it's readily available for a whole bunch of people to check on a whole bunch of folks' other stuff. There's a whole bunch of data pieces that are unique to individual voters in there. That's part of the safety protocols that we've made sure that we want to engage just to keep our voters as safe as possible. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I might be making you repeat yourself, but following up to that, so there's no, they can check this status. Is there anything they can do at this point to verify, or is that going to be more details to come in terms of submitting that?
Yeah, I want to reiterate, whether or not you're on the list is one question, okay? But what we want to do is make sure that folks do not start contacting their county recorders if they are on the list. If you're on the list, you can vote. If you're on the list, you can vote the full ballot. Let me be really clear about that. So if you want to check to see if you're on the list, that's great. But you can vote a full ballot. There's nothing required of you. We will be working with the counties to contact voters later to figure out how to get that documentation in. But we wanted to make sure to share as much information as possible with folks because we know people are interested. They've got so much more work to do between now and the end of this election into certification. We just don't want those folks to be inundated with a ton of requests right now. But at the same time, we've got these competing interests of all this data being pushed out there potentially by these other groups. And so that's sort of the balance that we have to strike. And unfortunately, these folks have made it so that it falls on the shoulders of our voters. And that's another regrettable consequence of this sort of thing.
So it's not going to specifically, so it's going to say on the website, do not contact your recorder just yet, or is there?
I don't know what the particular verbiage is in the letter. I haven't actually seen it myself. We've got it ready. It's up, and I'm sure folks will be able to see it real soon. But we're encouraging folks to just, in fact, we could probably check on that for you. We're encouraging folks not to check in yet.
I have another question about the website. What are the data points I would need to check? Like my birth date, address, full name, social security number, all the above, none of the above.
Yeah, the data points are, so you're going to have to start with your county, your last name, your date of birth, and then once you get to search by voter, you're also going to have to provide there's an identification method that's indicated on there, and then you'll provide some other identification, including, for example, tribal ID numbers and things of this nature. It'll pop up with your voter information. There's an option to correct if not, and then there will be a drop-down menu that'll ask, and it'll say new right at the top, is my name on the MVD public release record, and then it'll take you, if it is, to another page that'll give you some more information, whether or not it's included. Who was next? Yeah.
I know you said not for people on the list to not contact now, but what is that next step in the coming weeks, coming months for people on that list?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we want to take care of this election. If you're on the list, you're eligible, please don't contact your county recorders. Once we get past this election and all of the work those folks need to do for this election, then we will make sure that we start contacting folks from the 15 different county recorders' offices. We'll be assisting them in any way that we can, and then the information exchange can start. That's going to happen later this year. Don't forget, the canvass is not until November 20th. That's when the bulk of the work at the counties specific to this election is going to get kind of starting to wind down. So it's going to take a little bit of time. We're asking folks just to be patient.
So to clarify, people on the list should wait to be contacted.
Absolutely, people on the list should wait to be contacted, and if you are on the list, you are eligible to vote a full ballot according to the Arizona Supreme Court. Yeah.
Can you speak to the volume of calls and types of calls you've been getting from voters who think they might be potentially on this list over the past weeks, and specifically after that data was released this morning? I know that some of the folks who have received that list had tweeted out that they did on social media.
Yeah, I don't have any specific data as to that because we're right in the middle of an election and people are calling for all kinds of different reasons right now. So at some point we'll get some data breakdown on the category of the calls, but I don't have any of that information for you right now.
But have there been any reports of voter intimidation so far? Or?
Well, nobody had the list until just within the last couple hours, so those folks that I think might be planning what they're planning haven't really started that stuff yet. I just want to get out in front of it and make sure our voters are safe. Mary Jo?
Can you elaborate on what you think they're planning?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you exactly what I think some of these folks are planning. I think they're planning on going after voters who they might politically disagree with. I think they're planning on knocking on their doors and trying to intimidating them out of voting. I mean, these folks are shameless in their legal efforts. They believe that their right to investigate and harass voters is more important than their voters' right to actually cast a ballot. We saw it in the EPM case, where these folks think that someone who goes up to a line of voters and screams at them has more rights than the voters to peaceably assemble. You know, this is a coordinated effort by folks, and again, this is not political, by the way. I want to make sure folks understand this. This is anti-little d Democratic, not anti-big D Democratic. This is the potential harassment and intimidation of voters. Now, do they have a political motive at the end? I don't really know, other than the fact that we're worried for our voters. And that's why I will continue to fight against this with every chance that I get.
Well, what chance do you have now? I mean, the court case is settled.
Well, what we're doing right now is informing voters. If you are on the list, you can vote, and you have no duty to hand any information over to anyone who comes knocking on your door either later today or into Election Day tomorrow. The Supreme Court says you're eligible to vote in 2024, and that's the law. All right, I don't see anything else. Well, go ahead. One more real quick, and then I'm going to go in Spanish.
It was about that video earlier. How do you know if something that's been false or fabricated is from a foreign or domestic entity?
How do we know?
Yes.
Well, we don't know with definition at this particular stage, but we've got our strong suspicions. There's a variety of different characteristics that we look at, none of which we're going to be sharing because those have to do with our investigative processes. But we have very strong suspicions based on the folks that we have in this office and the communication that our security folks have with the Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center, the Department of Homeland Security, both at the state and at the federal level. And I have a feeling once we get done talking on this briefing I'm about to get into, we'll get a little bit of a better idea, and I think our suspicions are going to be confirmed. But they do remain suspicions right now, and I'm glad you clarified that for me. Thank you very much. One last one quick, and then I'll go in Spanish.
One of your earlier press releases on this coding glitch issue specifically talked about an internal investigation. What's the timeline of that, looking into your office?
On our internal investigation?
Yes.
Our internal investigation is proceeding as we have resources available. As you can imagine, we're in the middle of administering this election along with all of our partners, and we've got a whole lot more things that are much more time sensitive at this point. Once we got that Supreme Court ruling, we felt like we were pretty much solid. This is really a background thing to find out who knew what when so that we can make sure that we don't make these kinds of mistakes again. Again, let me reiterate, the Arizona Supreme Court ruling put us in a position that these voters are good to go. So the urgency behind that investigation has waned only so that we could administer this election first, and then we will get back on that full throttle.
When are you looking to produce a report by?
I don't think we have a goal yet, but I hope to get it as soon as we're as soon as we're satisfied that we've fulfilled, sort of the inquiries that we have. Bueno, para esos en español, brevemente les voy a presentar que hemos cumplido con el orden de tribunal que indica que debemos de poner los 218,000 individuos por parte de los procedimientos legales a los que demandaron esa información. Quiero expresar que tengo dudas, pero estoy cierto en mi posición que voy a seguir luchando para la seguridad de todos nuestros votantes en todas áreas. No estoy completamente de acuerdo con la decisión de tribunal que indica que deberemos dar esta información a esos individuos, pero porque es un orden de tribunal, voy a cumplir con la ley. Los votantes que crean que son parte de la lista pueden ir al sitio web my.arizona.vote para más información. Todos esos individuos que se aparecen en esa lista son elegibles de votar una boleta completa por parte del orden de Tribunal Supremo del Estado de Arizona. Los votantes que no son en la lista, que han recién registrado a votar, todavía tienen que enseñar su documentación de ciudadanía, pero ningún votante debe de ser intimidado o amenazado o sentir presión por parte de cualquier otra persona para enseñar identificación o indicar que son ciudadanos. En el futuro, pero antes de que se termine este año, los registradores del condado, de todos nuestros condados, van a ser en contacto con todos los votantes en la lista para poder empezar el proceso de obtener esa información. Queremos clarificar que los votantes, por favor, no contactan esos registradores hasta que se termine esto y sean contactados ellos mismos por parte de estos oficiales. Todavía tenemos esta elección que esos oficiales están trabajando fuertemente cada día para terminar esta elección. Después de la elección, entonces, vamos a tener más información. Por favor, si crean que están en esa lista o si son parte de la lista, visiten a my.arizona.vote y ahí pueden descubrir si son parte de la lista. Pero también de nuevo deja decir, si se encuentra que eres parte de la lista, tienes el derecho de votar una boleta completa, porque así es el orden del Tribunal Supremo del Estado de Arizona. Y con eso me despido. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to myself or JP. Is there anything basic that you're asking for, or did you need the secretary? Because if you need it from him, just let me know. Just send me an email.